Ciao.
Hi, I'm Lillian.
I'm Jordan.
And we're talking about Gene Borrello.
And Phil Leonetti.
Okay, so Gene was born June 6, 1984. He was born and raised in the Bronx, and from when he was young, he had already had a lot of problems in his childhood. So he was committing like petty crimes. Around 2003, he started getting a record for assault using weapons, which was the big thing that separated him from the other kids in the neighborhood. He also grew up in a neighborhood that had a lot of big bosses and like mafia connections. So growing up, he had connections to the Bonanno family and the Gambino family. So he was led straight to the mafia.
Right from the start. Phil had kind of the same story. He was born in 1953 and he was raised in Atlantic City. And from a young age, his uncle, Nicky Scarfo, was kind of his mentor, kind of raised him and started him on the crime path like pretty young. He said at 8 years old, his uncle was explaining to him like, this person, I'm going to kill this person because they disrespected our family, and like this is the reason for this, and kind of explaining to him all the crime and all the rules, and kind of, we don't talk to police, we play by our own rules, kind of getting him in that mindset super young.
Yeah, like setting both of them up to be affiliated later.
Yeah.
Never, ever. So how did he win your loyalty? What was his style? Because there's different styles of winning loyalty. What was his style?
It was just, I just felt like, you know, we were blood, and it was just something that I was born into, and I had to do the right thing. I figured he's my uncle, and you know, he's teaching me the right thing to do.
So Gene eventually did join the Bonanno family. He was an enforcer, but he was actually never a made man. He was an associate throughout his entire time, which I think makes his story a little more interesting when it comes to like omerta and stuff. But he had his first kill order was in 2006, and from that he actually was sentenced to 4 years in jail kind of straight away. He got out and started doing a lot of like breaking and entering, looting houses of rich people, basically anything violent that the family needed. He was kind of the one that they went to for a while.
I said, all right, I know what he means by sending him a message. I know what he means sending him a message. Gene's back loading up. 38, it's the coldest day of the winter. I'll never forget this. It's freezing out.
And they would steal tens of thousands of dollars from these families and like beat them up. It was really rough. So he was arrested again in 2014 for a string of robberies, assaults, arsons, and murders, just the whole shebang, and became a government witness in 2016. So he was locked up throughout that time. And then he decided to turn on every single person. So he took down like Joe Gotti, Vincent Asaro, who are like big names in his neighborhood. And he was in prison until 2019 when he was sentenced to probation and time served. It's kind of, yeah, like I said, people aren't sure if he actually broke the code because he wasn't a true member, but he was still an associate. So
Phil Leonetti he became a made man in the 70s, and then he became Nicky Scarfo's underboss and at age 31, and he was the youngest American Mafia underboss in history. So during his time as underboss, he conjured the nickname Crazy Phil during the 70s, and he says that he dislikes it, but it's kind of hard to tell because it's hard to tell if this guy has like a really big ego or if he really truly cares about like the crimes he committed and whatever. One of the people that he did kill was Vincent Falcone, he was a cement contractor, and his uncle Nicky told him to like ordered the killing, and Leonetti ended up dating his girlfriend, Falcone's girlfriend, after he killed him and marrying her. Pretty crazy. He was heavily involved in racketeering loan sharking, illegal gambling, and violent enforcement, which is kind of how he got his nickname, Crazy Phil. And then in 1989, he was convicted of racketeering, and he was sentenced to 45 years in prison. So after being sentenced to 45 years, he chose to cooperate with the police and basically sold out everyone, including his uncle, Nicky Scarfone, because even though he was his bodyguard from like the time that he could even walk. Like, he was raised by this guy. He spent 24 hours by his side. In one of his most famous interviews with Valuetainment, which has like 5 million views on YouTube, he says that his uncle groomed him, really, and kind of started him from the beginning to be paranoid and cautious, and that just started from a really young age for him.
Gene, at one point on a podcast, was like, everyone tries to find a reason for like, turning on their family and stuff when it's really you just don't want to do the time.
Say that until you're sitting in the visitation room.
And everyone's leaving, everyone's gone.
Right.
And, you know,
well, or your wife's begging you, saying, how am I going to take care of these
Right.
3 kids? What are you doing? You could do 5 years.
Easier said than done. I tell everybody that. You know what I mean? So when he cooperated, and then I remember when Joe Messino cooperated, that was nuts.
Yeah.
Speaking of podcasts and interviews, post-Mafia, Gene has been very vocal about his experience. As soon as he got out of jail in 2019, he was on a podcast in 2020, and it was like 15 parts. It went over his entire story leading up to that moment, and he kind of continued from there and never stopped. He also really likes to name drop, and at the same time calling other people rats, which is just a little hypocritical.
Are you serious? Omerta? You broke the code, motherfucker.
Okay, but you know what comes with cooperating.
Yeah, I do, but I was just an arrogant fuck. I went right back to my neighborhood afterward, bro.
Right, but I mean, you're not a made man.
No.
But you grow up hating rats.
Yeah, of course.
And then you sign this paperwork knowing how everyone's going to look at you. I mean, was there like a lot of like, I know it's for the moment, but you understand the big picture of as to what's happening.
Of course I do. Yeah.
And, he boasts about his expensive lifestyle. So even today, I was looking at his Instagram, he posted like 3 Rolex watches on his story. And like he has a bunch of cars, and he's kind of veering into the self-help world in my mind, because he released a book and he's releasing a short film, both of which you have to pay for to read or to watch. And he kind of hasn't stopped the criminal behavior as well. So in 2021, he threatened his ex-girlfriend's husband and father because in the process of writing his book, she wouldn't let him publish a picture of her. And this is when it really is like, you can tell that he hasn't learned, because he allegedly was like, you know what I used to do, like, I'll blow his head off, which is crazy. But he kind of never stopped. And then in 2023, he was sentenced to 6 months again because he was going on podcasts with these previously like mafia affiliated felons, and felons can't be together talking about felony behavior. And then in 2025, actually last month, so on like March 25th, he was arrested for domestic violence charges, stalking, battery, and just the same exact thing that he was doing before he originally went to jail.
You've had better days, right?
Yeah, locked up again. They got me on some bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Everything all right?
Yeah, like I said, people are mad, they get scorned, you know how things go. Things get exaggerated and blown out of proportion, and this is what happens. I went through this before, because of your background, they're always going to take it more serious, you know what I mean? So like, if a regular person gets this, they won't get a bracelet, they won't get all these fucking things, but because I have serious violence and committed bad acts, they're always going to take it more seriously. You know what I mean? So
Of course.
I got put on a bracelet, and the lawyer that I hired is really good, and he said he's going to knock it out the park.
So he definitely has not changed. He definitely sees himself as a different person than everyone else who's like speaking out and doing the same exact thing he's doing. But.
You know what I'm saying? But he's still labeling that life no good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But he knows no one's going to do nothing about it.
I wonder what he's doing for actual money.
He's making a lot of money on that.
You think he's making?
I know he reached out. I know a guy reached out. How about this? I'll tell you how sick in the head he is, that he thinks he's like Tom Hanks. A guy reached out to him and says, yo, I want you on my show. I love you. Please, I'll give you money, $25,000.
So in 2012, Leonetti published Mafia Prince, Inside America's Most Violent Crime Family and the Bloody Fall of La Cosa Nostra. So in that book, he basically details his entire mafia experience. He's admitted to 10 killings, and he details them and the violence that he inflicted and endured. And I mean, it's undeniable that he is monetizing all of this, and kind of like using like these podcasts and like marketing for his book to really like make money off the whole thing. It's in a different way, I'd say, than Borrello, because he's kind of more, even in his book and in his interviews, he's kind of more matter of fact about the whole thing. So he does really like detail this violence, and like kind of, he doesn't show a lot of like remorse or like emotion, but he also doesn't seem to be glamorizing it as much. And he kind of just is like really like, this is the timeline, this is what happened, this is what I did. And although he doesn't seem like really like emotional, sympathetic about it, he still is not making it more glamorous or like romanticizing it for the public.
So you know, some of these movies, the way they portray what the life was like and how much fun and how much of a blast they had, you know, being in the mob, you didn't experience that part at all.
No, I didn't. I was a 24-hour bodyguard for my uncle. That was my life. When we would go to dinner, I would go with him. You know, we would be a bunch of guys, or if he was out with his girlfriend, I would be with him for a little bit, unless we went to a spot where nobody knew him, and you know, and there was a hotel there, and we were just going to stay overnight and all that. And then I would leave him there and come back the next morning.
Where is the fun in living this life?
It wasn't that much fun.
Yeah, I think that is kind of the key place where they differ, because Borrello is definitely, like, even in interviews now, he's still 5-6 years later going over the same stories in these interviews, and he's getting very, like, he's getting excited when he's telling these stories, like reliving these moments of just like being in the family or doing these criminal acts. He's definitely glorifying it, and I mean, he's still doing it is the biggest thing, so he's definitely not remorseful at all.
Broad daylight, took the whole store, walked out with the whole store, 6 laundry bags.
Okay, but robberies don't always go according to plan.
Of course not. The dog could come out, the neighbor, you know, you got to do homework. I'm spending money to rob you, remember that. I'm in high-end cars. I don't look like an armed robber. I walk into your store, I got a gold presidential on. I got $10,000 in my pocket. But I know I'm going to take $600,000 out of your store.
When he was first released, actually, everyone in his neighborhood was like, oh, this guy sucks. Like, why would you let him back out? He's just going to keep doing the same thing. So I think everyone just can tell from who he is. You can tell from even the short clips and interviews and everything. He's just, all he cares about is looking cool and committing mafia-related crimes.
Yeah. Leonetti is more like, he says in his book, this is not a Hollywood movie, it's not The Godfather, it's real life, and it's ugly. And he's also very openly critical about his uncle, who has put a hit on him, I think still to this day. He was in witness protection after he got out of jail, but he was always critical of Nicky and painted him kind of as like a very toxic, destructive guy who he stood by out of fear rather than admiration. And he also talks about how it's now kind of embedded in him to be so paranoid and cautious. And I mean, obviously because he has a hit out on him, but like even before that, he was just like, this is just how I grew up and this is how I was groomed. And And I mean, his story does, I think it does a little bit deter, it might deter people from, like, young men from joining the mafia, maybe. Because he really does, like, show that it's, like, not all fun and games. But also at the same time, it's, like, it's a toss-up. Because also his book is called The Mafia Prince. Like,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of, it's a little bit of both, I'd say.
And he doesn't have, like, a record or anything anymore. Like,
No,
he hasn't
yeah.
done anything since he...
After he got out of jail, he didn't reoffend. Yeah. It's hard to tell if Leonetti is so emotionless and, like, detached when he, like, tells these stories and in his writing in his book, if it's because he's not remorseful or if it's because it's just, like, it's going to the public, you know what I mean? He doesn't want to be so vulnerable in the public eye. But one thing is he doesn't show his face, or he has in a couple interviews, but in his most famous interviews he doesn't show he has his face and his voice disguised, which he said is because of for his safety.
Yourself when you're doing an interview.
Well, you never know. There's a lot of crazy people out there that want to be gangsters, that figure if they do run into me or recognize me somewhere, or take a shot at me and make themselves a big man. They could, you know, go to Philadelphia and say, yeah, I killed Phil Leonetti. So I'm always careful.
And so I think that's a big difference between the two of them. He's yeah, I think he is less concerned with his media presence, like, as a person, like, less his, like, persona being famous and more his story.
I'm his blood, and that really bothers him.
How bad does he want you?
I guess I would never be dead enough for him, Forrest. If he could keep killing me, he would be a happy guy.
Let's compare him to Hitler. Put Nicky in Hitler's place, he would have outdid him.
He's like the devil.
I mean, this guy's still living in the same neighborhood, still getting into beef with other guys who were in the mafia, so very different people.
Yeah.